Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Barry Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show, and I'm really happy to have Power Metallic Mines, formerly Power Nickel. If I screw up that during the interview, I'm sorry, but they're an explorer that has a fantastic discovery, a very high grade discovery. It's a polymetallic, so it's got multiple metals in it, copper, nickel. We're going to talk about the various metals and why that's important. And they've got a roster of shareholders that is impeccable with some of the great legends actually in the mining business from Australia, Canada. Robert Friedland's in there. We're going to talk about all that. Terry, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, Alan, we've tried to do this several times, right? We finally got it sorted out. I apologies for not being here sooner, but happy to be on the show finally.
Well, you really have an attention-grabbing discovery there, Terry, and I wanted to get that story in front of my audience, especially now that you're really cranking up the drilling again after a small hiatus there while you guys were getting ready for this drilling program. But you're hitting the ground running. The ground is already full of high grade, and I love high grade, Terry.
You know what, Alan? Honestly, if you get asked for anything in mining, the number one thing you're looking for is grade, right? You got to get tonnage, but grade is your friend, right? Escapes a lot of things on side, and we've been, enormously blessed, by the powers that be above there that just looked after us in a great way, and we're enormously thankful for that, for sure.
Well, there's an old saying in the business that grade is king, and I agree with that to a degree. But what is also very important is continuity of the high grade. And putting those two together is really king. And you've got both of that. You've got high grade and high grade continuity, which is exceptional.
Yeah, it's an enormously thick, river of polymetallic, metals there that's running through that system. And I mean, the whole discovery thing was, quite amazing when you think of it. I'll give you a little background history on it if you like. We acquired, the Nisk main, which had a historical 3.1 million tons, about 1.5% nickel EQ from Critical Elements back maybe 4 years ago, and we had done our work
Oh,
drill. We thought there was more. We did our first round of drilling, and we hit, and we sort of went in a different direction. Had some some interesting sort of exploration approaches on that. Cranked it up, and then we got probably I think somewhere over like post the 4311 of over 7 million tons, 7.1, and then we probably have about 8.5. So we sort of always, back in the day when we were Power Nickel, I would say to people, we sort of saw easily in our mind getting to 30 million tons on the nickel stuff. And we just sort of saw that there was a lot of potential for that. And our average depth of Nisk main at the time was around 400 meters. And how we were financing ourselves at the time is we were doing these $2 million deals where I would put up a half a million, my family and I would put up half a million. My friends or business associates or contacts in the industry, guys like Rob McHugh and other people like that would put up half a million. And then we do the 2-for-1, with the Quebec, with the charity flow through buyback. So we'd put the stock in permanent hands, but we'd get double the money to work with. So we get,
Terry, I'm going to interrupt you there for a second.
yep.
I know you are intimate with all this information, but my audience may not be. Folks in Quebec, they have a very pro-mining jurisdiction, and that enables companies that are putting the money in the ground to get extra leverage on that money. And that's what Terry was talking about, how they explain it again, Terry. Sorry for
Yeah, so
interrupting.
it basically amounts to it from just a simple way to look at it from an investor is that the company gets money at twice the price the investors put in. So in our case, if we raised $2 million, the investors really only invested $1 million, but the company got $2 million to work with to de-risk the investment. So that was obviously we used that several times, and that's how we sort of pushed it forward. So and it leads to this funny way of how we discovered the line zone. So we were at Nist, Maine, drilling the nickel successfully. We had a couple of the holes run long, so we were chasing mineralization, stayed with the holes. And so the average hole was around 400 meters, and we had 200 meters left in the drill budget. So the guys came to me and they said, "Hey, Terry, do we want to put another hole here? Or if we do, you're going to have to throw some more cash at it." I'm like, "Well, I don't want to throw cash directly because if I do it through the market, I get $4. If I throw it indirect, it's only $1. That's not good math." So I said, "What do we have for 200 meters that would be productive?" And they said, "Well, we got this, target, 5.5 kilometers away. Same looking, it's ultramafic at surface, airborne anomaly. We think we get 200 meters would be a great test, and it's a winter target. It's a bit marshy up there, so now's the time to do it." And I'm saying, "Great, let's do it." So we banged the hole down, and that was the line zone. We hit this crazy initial discovery hole. 1 ounce platinum group metals and 1.5% copper, and we thought, wow, that is really strange, and it certainly turned the geological understanding of the project around in a big way. And as luck would have it, that was the summer of the lithium boom, so we couldn't get helicopter rigs, which we needed to drill that particular area, and so we had to wait until January, and we started drilling in January, and we just we drilled 16 holes, 15 of the 16 hit, and 8 of them were spectacular hits, like 20 meters of 7-8% copper equivalent, like crazy stuff that you could barely lift these things. They were so heavy. And the weird part was, I remember we were hitting it and we didn't have the assays, but obviously when you hit that high grade stuff, the geologists know, and you can see it. And it's like, so I said, and we were running out of money, and I said, well, and of course, I think the Russians or somebody was doing something crazy at the time, and stocks everywhere down. So we're back at 20 cents. And I said, look, we got to raise the money. We need the cash. So I said, we need to put out some news in this, and we need to say it's material because we know it's material. And that's material is a dangerous term if you're a public company, because it has security implications. If you say you have a material discovery, you better buddy will have one, because otherwise you're probably going to jail. It's like it's not something you take lightly. But I knew we had one, and I didn't want I wanted to make sure all of our shareholders and interested parties were aware this is what the company thought. So I said, hey, look, we've made a material discovery. I showed the pictures of the core, said it's material, and it was like it's like the one arm applause. nobody cared. So it's like we ended up doing that $2 million round. I think I took down 60 or 70% of it myself, just because we needed the money. And it was obviously that turned out to be the best investment of my life. So that was one of those funny things. And then of course a couple months later the assay started to hit, and that's when we got Gina Reinhardt came to the table, and then obviously Friedland and McEwen and for second rounds, and it sort of took off from there. But that was the origin story.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I was just talking to somebody the other day about how a lot of great discoveries, how they're kind of not by accident, but they have an interesting origin story.
They
Uh,
do. It is
and
very, very typical for mining, that, and it's like we would have drilled that hole at some point, and it was a thoughtful hole, but we sure as hell didn't expect to get what we got. Right.
exactly.
That part was God. That was, thank you, God. We appreciate your blessing, Power Metallic. But yeah, so that's
I mean,
but
even
that's
if you look at Robert Friedland himself, Diamond Fields was out in Newfoundland, Labrador looking for diamonds, and their geologists were flying back from prospecting. They saw a rusty colored outcropping of rock, and they convinced the helicopter pilot to drop down and let him take some samples. Then they had to convince the team that they could assay them. they came back with really good results and still had to convince to drill it, and the rest is history. And so,
Yeah.
this is just an example in the case of Robert Friedland himself, God looking after them.
Yeah, it was funny when he had been a small shareholder. I met him through a friend, and he had bought a few shares. I think almost from the nostalgic, background of his nickel investment. I think, and then when I met him, when prior to making the first investment, I met him, face to face for the first time in New York at a Carlisle hotel, which is a fabulous hotel, and he had a beautiful suite there. I met him up there, and some small talk a little bit, and then he sort of says, "Hey, well, Terry," he said, "Look, this is one of two things that's happened here." He says, "Copper and PGMs don't come like this. So either you've salted the core, or you've got a duck-billed platypus." And I'm like, this is the first time I'm meeting this guy, and I just start laughing, and then he starts laughing. He said, "I know you didn't salt the core. We already checked that out." he said. He said, what you got is a duck-billed platypus. And he said, what I mean by that, he said, this shouldn't happen, yet we know it has happened. And he said, I've been lucky a couple of times in my life where I've found these discoveries that shouldn't happen, but they did happen. And of course, they were big. So he says, this is going to be big. So that's why I'm in. So that was,
That's an interesting story on its own. I mean, Canada wasn't supposed to have diamonds. There's been lots of stories where you go into an area that's not supposed to have something, and it does. And here you've got something that's not supposed to happen, but it is.
yeah. And it's funny, like, it's why, I think a lot of the experienced Quebec explorers, saw this and they thought, this is some small anomaly, something this will not last. This is, and now they're realizing we actually we've got a research project being done by, I think it's University of Quebec, on the discovery, and it'll change the maps of Quebec geologically, because the dating was wrong. And it's just like these things can happen, right? You can get, and that happens because of course these guys have you can imagine, how much ground they have to cover and how little time they have to cover each ground. So of course they it's somewhat subject to change. So yeah, there'll be changes to the Quebec maps now, and this is one of the reasons why our acquisition of the lift land was so important for us, because our view is this is not, obviously we believe Lion will become a mine, we believe Nisk will become a mine, and but we believe this is going to be a mineral district. And the thing with these types of discoveries, it's called an orthomagmatic discovery, which is which we learned after we made the Lion Zone discovery. This is the type of discovery we had, is that they tend to be they come in districts, and there'll be a lot of pods of mineralization we expect. And so for us, we did a fairly thorough study of the region and determined there was maybe 8 primary targets, and now we got 7 of them. So we're quite stoked about that, and the team is really excited about it. And obviously we're focusing on growing the Lion Zone, and showing, we think, at our core, we believe that Nisk and Lion are related subsurface. That this is the way this type of discovery works is it's a zone system. It goes from nickel to copper, and it's sometimes faulting wise. You can have the copper at the bottom and the nickel on the top, or it can be nickel on the bottom and copper on the top. Obviously, in our case, we're quite happy to have the copper on the top, because it's the $500 plus rock that's at top, and the $200 rock that's at the bottom, 250 or whatever. So the way to be successful in polymetallics, according to Steve Beresford, our thought leader on the geology side, and our board member, he basically says, like, you got to find these chutes, that contain the polymetallic, and then drill down the chutes, and then at the bottom of the chute, you're going to find your source, which is all these things are nickel sulfide source. And I mean, it's possible it could have been eroded away. A number for you I'll throw at you is that on our
Well, it's
presentation that's
hard
on.
to see the source having been eroded away. Maybe you erode away the distal part of it, which you got it in the drill hole, so it's hard to say
Yeah,
that was eroded away unless everything was
yeah.
flipped upside down.
Again, we don't think it's been eroded away, but
Yeah,
he says it's always a possibility, right? So we're just saying that the possible. And what's interesting, there's only been 20 of these in the history of the world, these orthomagmatic discoveries, and every single one of them is either a major, i.e., 1 million tons of contained metals, or a super major with more than 10 million tons. So right now, analysts would say we're probably
that's not the rock package, folks. That's the metal content he's talking about. He's not talking about a 20 million ton deposit. He's talking about the metals contained within the deposit.
yeah. So these are literally the world's most profitable mines. Like that's not me arm waving. This is just a simple statement of fact. And so
Actually, and that's very exciting because some of the greatest mines out there are polymetallic, where they've got multiple metals in them, folks, because sometimes copper could be up or platinum and palladium could be up. And so, it has a way of mixing your
naturally hedged,
values.
naturally hedged. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's interesting. So so we've been sort of following that track and sort of stepping out and thankfully we've been lucky to be able to raise sufficient capital to go at this in a big boy way. We've got a really great science team. We've got Steve Beresford, who is probably, if he's not the top polymetallic explorer in the world, he's certainly in that conversation. He was chief geologist at First Quantum, then at MMG, and then IGO, three successive multi-billion-dollar mining companies. That he was certainly part of the geological leadership team, if not the primary guy. And then all he does right now is look for these types of deposits. So when I contacted him, I actually reached out through LinkedIn. My son actually put me onto the guy, which is funny as hell. Sends me this video, said, "Dad, watch this video. The guy's talking about NISC, but he doesn't even know we exist. You should talk to him because you should get him on board." As if it was easy. So I watched the video and I thought, well, he is talking about NISC. So I reached out to him through LinkedIn. Now I fully justify my LinkedIn investment for all those years where I was getting haunted by people trying to sell me crazy Nigerian loan deals and this type of scam and that type of scam. But we ended up, reaching out, and he got back, and I sent him some assays, and this is before the limestone started to hit, and he said, "Well, I think you're onto something." He said, "Keep me posted." So then, when the limestone started to hit, I said, "Can you come over and tell us what you think? Because I mean, these things better than anybody." So he agreed and came over and got up to the site, and he was just obviously so taken with the discovery that I just thought, wow, we got to get this guy on the team because he just brings such a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of how to attack this thing. Like right now, we're using our geophysicist we're using is one of his contacts that he worked at Sakatti on, so which is the last known discovery of this type was about 18 years ago or so, Anglo-American, on their Sakatti discovery in Finland.
Oh,
And before that it was Voisey's Bay. So these things are discovered every like 20 years or so, it seems, and they're big. So having him on board has certainly been helpful, and tapping into his team has led to us to use a lot of the great techniques that have really pushed this forward fairly fast, like the downhole EM and things like that have been certainly super helpful.
well, my geophysicist mentor, he was the world exploration manager for Anglo.
Oh,
And
no way.
he told me that one time he said, sometimes the magic works and sometimes the magic doesn't work. And the trick in exploration is to have your geophysics confirmed with drill holes. Then you
Yes.
know the magic is working. And I've listened to interviews with you and Dr. Beresford and your geo team, and the magic certainly is working.
Yeah, we've been blessed, hitting on like probably about 50% of our holes, hitting the sulfides. Like not all of them will be economic. Some of them are you're finding out, where is the halo zone, where is the core of the zone, et cetera. That's all drill bit driven. But with the borehole EM, we've been really able to identify where the sulfides are. and usually it takes a couple holes to target them, and then you get your intersection, and that's phenomenal success rate in drilling, as you know. So we'll keep on hoping that works. I mean, at some point it'll stop working because that's how it works. But
Then
you
you're
know,
at the limits.
until then, you keep on doing it, right? Repeat until rich, you know. So we're certainly following that concept.
Well, a couple other things that I've recognized when Dr. Beresford has talked is the importance of structure and the importance of the mineralization in relation to those structures. What I
Yep.
mean by that, folks, is structures are cracks in the earth, if you will, that are conduits for metals bearing fluids to make their way. They're the path of least resistance, if you will. And what I really excites me about the project is you guys have a very good handle on those structures and how that's related to your high grade mineralization.
Yeah, one of the things we did that helped a lot in that was we used the fleet space technology, and it was it's sort of I guess an advanced form of seismic. So it's not in oil and gas. You have Schlumberger, and they're like you're spending millions of dollars for those types of things,
I worked
and
in the oil fields when I was very young and had a strong back. Used to see
it,
Schlumberger all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. So there, and then you had the mineralized, sort of seismic, which was very minimal, I would say, and it gives you some guidance, but it wasn't good. And then this new ambient noise technology advances it towards Schlumberger, not completely, but it gets you a long ways there, and it really helps on structure. So we did that over the line zone, and we had a very good sense of where the structures were, and that really helped us. So we knew where we were drilling within the structure, and that was definitely helpful. And then you added that with the borehole EM, and as Steve said, exploration has a toolbox. You know what I mean? And you keep on using the tools that are working, and then when they stop working, you look further deeper in the toolbox and say, okay, what else do we have, to help us unravel Mother Earth's mysteries,
Well, what
and
you're describing there is what my geophysicist mentor used to talk about is like you also have to have the right geophysical survey to see if the magic is working, and then you confirm that with the drill hole. So you guys are using those tools very well, and they're being confirmed with the truth machine, the drilling.
yes, yeah. So we've been fortunate there, and we're gonna, we're having a pretty aggressive program this summer. We started it, and we'll be stepping out between between Nisk and Lion. There's about 5.5 kilometers there. So we'll be doing every 300 meters coming across. We've got some ideas where we're going with that, and why, and we'll be doing these 400 meter holes, 400 meter holes, I guess, and each hole will do borehole EM. And so if you think of these boreholes have a 150-meter diameter, so in other words, we're going to see the entire 5 kilometer stretch. We're 400 meters deep. So that's the way we think we'll identify the next lion zones, because these things, they historically, the way they worked in these other 20 discoveries around the world, you don't get one line zone. There's several of these things. You just have to find them, and this is like probably the best pathway to find them. And then obviously finding them is certainly going to be very joyous day for the for the power metallic family. But we've got some good leads right now. We've
Well,
made good.
basically, folks, for the non-geo out there is that when you get these kind of grades and those kind of thicknesses, what it means is that there's a very powerful system that is pumping the fluids up in along those structures, and then you'll get dilation zones where the cracks in the earth open up, and then the metals bearing fluids can pool up, or like a swimming pool, create these pods, and they're big pods of super high grade. So if you get one, it's usually not a one-off. In this case, you already have two, and it stands to reason that there's underneath all of that system is something that's very powerful and high pressure, pumping the fluids with loaded up with metals up into these along these structures and into these dilation zones where the rocks are opening up.
Yeah, and what Steve says is that the nickel sulfide, the way to visualize is think of the palm of your hand, and the nickel sulfide is the palm, and that's the origin, and that some hydrothermal action came down, picked up the copper sulfides from there, and the fingers, that's where it gets deposited. So the line zone's one finger, and we're looking for other fingers, and Nisk is really part of the palm, we think, or part maybe another pearl of the palm, and so we don't feel we've found the palm yet. We have some ideas of where it is, and it's probably deeper in the system. And the way Steve puts it, uh, if you find 1 ton of copper sulfide in these systems, on average, you're going to, in the other discoveries that have been documented, you're going to find 5 tons of nickel sulfide. It'll range between 3 to 7. So right now we're probably 1.5 to 2 copper to 1 nickel. So in addition, we're finding more copper, but we're going to find a boatload more nickel sulfide, and that nickel sulfide will be, probably, based upon, again, reverse engineering the math. Steve can sort of predict that Nisk main, which is like 1.25% right now or something like that, isn't the mother of this system. You have to be in the 2.5, 3% to have produced this type of juice. So we haven't found that yet. So that's the exciting part. So we're the way I look at it, the reason why we were able to raise that money in February, I believe, was that we were able to show convincingly that we're trading at 20, 30 cents on the dollar relative to our peers, which was at that point was $1.45, even though the company got a lot more because of the Quebec structure. So we got that money because they thought, hey, we're buying this at 20, 30 cents on the dollar, what you discovered. But the asymmetric upside is you're probably going to discover a lot more. So it's like there's several ways to win. Just re-rating it is going to be a big win. And then if you we think we're going to find a lot more material here that we're going to get to be at least a major. Maybe we're going to get to be a super major. We don't know. But that's all multiples of here. So that's why we got that money, because back in February was still, and it's still, even now it's starting to loosen up a bit. We're getting a better mining market, but I think TSXV's moved up from like 500 and change to 750, 800. So that's positive. It's a long ways away from anywhere it should be, but at least moving in the right direction. But so I think that that's what drove people to invest, and that's why it was so funny that the stock would fall off. But I think we're coming out into a newsy season. We're going to get a bunch of assays out shortly. There's going to be some other good news.
Well,
We're looking very
before we
serious.
talk about the what's pending, I want to go back on something you said there, and it ties in with what I've listened to Dr. Beresford talk about. And what Terry described there is the zonation of a system. So the further you get away from the source, you'll get different kinds of metals in the system. And earlier I talked about the power of this system. By the way, I did it. I said power nickel instead of power metallic. The zonation that you're seeing is classic for these kind of systems. But when I talked about the power of the system, that is really important because you're looking at the one of those fingers Terry was talking about is 5,000 meters from the sort of the palm of his hand. So there again, you're getting evidence that the power of the system is incredible to get it 5,000 meters away. And now you guys control basically the whole structure. So, you could have a bunch of lions and a bunch of nisks along that system, or one big nisk and a little Nisk, and way over here you got a lion zone.
Yeah, that's certainly what we think. The better there's certainly odds are in our favor that that's we're going to find a lot more of this stuff. So and I think we're off to a good start this summer and looking. We got 4 rigs running right now. They'll run between now and the end of mid-September when we take a break for moose break. So that'll we'll drill about somewhere between 20 to 24,000 meters, maybe 22 to 24 by
Okay.
that point. And then something similar from October 15th to December 15th. And then probably another 50,000 plus meters to bring it up to 100,000 the next year in 2026, all fully funded. So we're all good to go. So we're we're in good shape there. We're one of the things we're going to do to, I think it's interesting. You know, mining is on the front pages now. It's starting to get talked about by presidents and prime ministers and by talking heads, and it's in critical mineral policies and these things, and it's now subject to tariffs and all sorts of interesting stuff. And people are now realizing, holy crap, we're running out of this stuff and we need to get it because either if whatever you're doing, if you're watching this on an iPhone or on a computer, or you're listening in your car, everything that made it possible for you to watch this show or to drive in that car either come out of the ground or was grown. There's only two ways things come. They're either mined, extracted, or grown. That's it. So the world needs a lot more of it, and so we're thinking now is the time for us to move to the U.S. in terms of the capital markets. So we'll expect to this fall list in New York, and we think that'll be a boon. We've already had a lot of good U.S. investors, and I think we'll get a lot more. And I think we sort of have to make it easy for them, list on a very reputable exchange, and I think that'll be part of our re-rating process, honestly. So I'm excited about bringing the assays out. I'm excited about listing in New York and just continuing to work this great deposit.
Yeah,
Great,
well,
great mineralized area.
there you
Deposits will get
go.
in trouble.
No, it's okay to call it something like that a deposit. Where you get in trouble is calling it an ore body or a resource before you
Sure.
have that. I mean, it is a deposit.
Yeah. And
How good it is.
we do have 143 101, so that part's okay.
Yeah.
And on the 43 101 side, because people ask us, say, Terry, when are you going to give us a mineral resource on land? And the answer is, end of next year. And the reason why is that it's growing so quickly, you wouldn't want to put a cap on it,
Right.
and what we're doing is last week we put out the mineralogy update, and we will complete a metallurgical study and get that out end of the year or early next year. And that's an important part. That's something that market needs to see. And we obviously believe it's going to be, like we showed last week, that we believe this is all going to report to the copper concentrate, and we'll get very good recoveries in copper and the platinum group metals. So that'll be really good for us. But we'll get that out end of the year. But otherwise, we'll just
It
put out.
always boggles my mind how quickly a new discovery and everybody's clamoring for a resource estimate. And one of the things that I'm always fearful of is what you said there, is that they don't. Everybody thinks that even inside the mining business, that it's going to cause a re-rating. And you got to be careful with that, folks, because sometimes it causes a re-rating in the wrong direction because it caps the project. And in my opinion, companies, until they get close to the limits of the deposit, they shouldn't be doing a resource estimate. Secondly, I would never do a resource estimate unless I was ready to very quickly do a preliminary economic assessment on it. Because you have been in the business a long time, Terry, as have I. How many times have you seen a resource that had a whole bunch of inferred in it, all kinds of arm waving, and it collects dust for 5 to 10 years before they can ever do a preliminary economic assessment on it? So I like it when you're kind of getting close to the limits and you can, while the ink is drying on the resource, you can run a preliminary economic assessment on it. Until you got there, it's not ready, folks.
Yeah, that's our assessment as well. So we're definitely going to, put out the drill collars, the estimates, let the analysts continue to get their projections of how big the thing is. We'll definitely give them the right answers on the metallurgy because I think that's stuff that people would have tended to speculate on with lower grade recoveries than they'll actually be. We're using 80%. We think we'll exceed that. And that's easy positive economics you can bring to the discovery. So we'll definitely do that, and that's off to a good start. So, I think it was funny. I was talking to a big precious metals investor, one of the biggest in the U.S., and the question was about what's the makeup of your polymetallic mix, and our we say in our presentation, the canned presentation, is sort of we think ultimately the ultimate makeup we think will be a third nickel, a third copper, and a third noble metals, i.e., platinum, palladium, gold, silver, almost equal parts. And I think that's accurate in the fullness of time, but that's when we're at our ultimate size.
Right.
Today, the line zone, which is where most of the excitement is probably 55% precious metals, and 45% copper. So of the 55%, 40% of that is platinum and palladium, and 10% gold, 5% silver. So, when we talk about those, when our top five holes were 20 meters of 8% copper equivalent, that's using 950 for platinum and palladium. But we know
Oh my
that's,
gosh.
yeah. So the people have fallen asleep a little bit, and maybe partly our fault that we're not really banging home that this is probably the best platinum and palladium discovery in the world too. On top of everything else, because we've got like 6-8 grams of the stuff, per ton. You know what I mean? So it's
Wow.
like it's crazy, and and I think that market's got a lot of upside. We have a you know parabolic sort of curve at the back of our presentation on that, and you can see where platinum and palladium. I mean, they used to be priced equivalent to gold, and
Exactly.
there's still a long ways to go. And
Yeah.
the thing is that those sectors have been in a structural shortage for
For
the
a
last
long.
several years,
And they've
and
been left for dead because
they've been
everybody,
left for dead because the price. You can't make money at these prices.
no,
Nobody can, I
you
mean, we
can't
can,
do.
but nobody else can. And it's like, so you got like these old mines in South Africa, which are going to be shut down because of power situations and everything and low grade. And then the other supplier is Russia, which is like, well, how reliable is that these days? So it's like it's got strategic, defense issues associated with this whole thing, and it's like, wow, so that there's a commodity that I think has definitely got some serious upside is the
Well,
PGM.
you've talked about metals, so let's get into that. And Terry, with the movement in the price of gold, the movement in the price of silver, the movement in the price of copper, the movement in the price of platinum and palladium, what I've been harping on people lately is that we are at the beginning of the next great metals bull market. We've had gold already moves, made an important breakout in 2024, early 2024. Silver has recently made its important breakout, as has copper, and palladium and platinum are doing the same thing. And so your timing really couldn't be better because you've got all of these metals that are important in a metals bull market.
Yeah, no, we I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's like I was saying to somebody, like we're in a really safe jurisdiction, right? In Quebec, like I mean, because that's another safe jurisdiction. We're literally logistics. We're off the road. You could drive from route north to our site to the rig. That doesn't usually happen in mining. We're 8 kilometers outside of town in Namaska, which has got an airport accommodations for our guys. It's also, we've had really great working relationship with the James Bay Cree. They're amazing people. Really, they understand mining. They're very pro mining. So it's like, wow, that's another
They
huge tip.
understand energy, they're
Yeah,
entrepreneurial.
totally. Yeah,
My
yeah.
Matthew Kuhncom is a great guy. I'm Cree myself, so
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, no, we were up. I was up meeting with them last week, for 3 days, and yeah, we're certainly having some great conversations with them. They've been super helpful, and the federal government's now really trying to support them getting involved earlier and earlier
Perfect.
in deals, and we're certainly encouraging that because they're a wonderful partner, and we want to sort of get them in the ground for where they can make a bunch of money too. So I think that'll be interesting.
Well,
Sort of,
my pillars, I've done a lot of outreach for permitting in Canada. And my pillars of success when it comes to dealing with the First Nations is that inclusion, respect, and consultation. If you
yeah,
do those three things well, you're never going to have problems.
yeah, I agree. When I started in the project, I said to the chief, I said, I'll come up every 6 months, and we'll meet with you, meet with the council, meet with the community, and we'll tell you what we're doing, and why we're doing it, and we'll keep you posted, and that's what we've done, and we, now he knows that this is what we're going to continue to do, and it's and obviously they're encouraged, they're excited because obviously it's something good's happening here. I shared with them Rob McEwen did an amazing job. I don't know if you've seen his Los Azules video
Of
where
course. Yeah.
okay, so to me that's why Rob's a genius. He's a real thought leader for miners in that he took that, I would say, a good project but with troublesome ESG associated with it, which could have been like a category killer. And he basically turned it on its head and he made it a champion. He reimagined what a mine could be. And I think it was something that was a lesson for all of us. And I certainly took it to heart, and I showed that to, Chief Jolly up at the James Bay. I said, look, obviously it's a different country with different issues and different nuances. So we're not going to, it won't look like that because we don't have those issues here. But I mean, the point is, we can do a lot of different things, here that can really do. For example, the produce in Damascus is terrible. You know what I mean? They just and it's
They got to
understandable
ship it
from
all in, folks.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's understandable from the current logistics why it is that way. But I said, look, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a bloody good greenhouse that's going to produce this stuff locally. So we're going to get produce that's going to be fit for everyone, and we can do some. And I said, yeah, it's going to add cost to the mix, but there's enough economics in this that we can put more money in capex to do some things that'll really transform because what they want, obviously, at the James Bay Cree is they want to have their young people stay in the community to get good jobs. But the young people, of course, they've been out in the world. They want some of the good stuff. They want to have good food. They want to have some restaurants. They want to have so that's all good. So I think that the neat thing is that we don't know what that project will ultimately end up looking like, but I think there's one thought is that, hey, we can create something special here. There's enough economics that we can be, generative to everyone, that in addition to them getting royalties and stuff, like they're already cut in because of their Quebec government side of things, there's also a chance to be shareholders. There's also a chance to create something wonderful for the community, and I think that's, they get that. And I said, look, that's just, in my mind, a way to create a good partnership, and it's going to mean we're going to have quicker permitting because you guys are going to be on side and are a friend, and this is not about trying to bang the last dime out, that's not what it's about, and even though I'm a capitalist, but I recognize it's really the value in the long term, not what you can, squeeze from the nickel today.
Well, capitalism is about being a smart business person too, and it's very smart what you're talking about there. I've kind of had a dream for a long time, Terry, that I talk about my great grandfather. He had a trap line for 60 years, and if you had have went to him and showed him a piece of rock and said, "Have you ever seen this?" If he had any time in that 60 years, he would take you to the exact spot. And so I've always said that, the mining industry has a tremendous resource there of youth that have these inherent skills to do what we call old-fashioned geology,
Yeah,
walking around and looking down for certain kinds of rocks. And if you have any opportunity to get out there with the youth and get them walking around and looking down and doing that old-fashioned geology, not only do you create a job for today, that guy could be the next Robert Friedland.
Yep.
So there's a long legacy there. I think that more companies should be doing that because these kids have tremendous inherent skills of they've been walking on their bloodlines have been walking on that ground for
It's so
tens
it's
of
so
thousands of
important.
years.
And that's one of the things that helped us so much at the site is when we got that property, we walked the package. We had our guys walk the package, and we did. And when we did the fleet space technology, which was putting these little spheres on the ground every sort of 50, 100 meters, we basically went in a grid pattern every 100 meters dropping these spheres. So of course you're seeing a lot of ground, right? And so the guys we said, hey, while you're out there dropping this stuff, let's get a good read about what we're seeing, and that's really helped our learning a lot, the outcrops are there, and the clues were there, you know
Yeah,
what I mean? And it's like, it's sort of like that old question: if a tree falls in the forest, does anybody hear? You know,
they got
you
to be
gotta
listening.
you gotta be listening, right?
Yeah.
You gotta be listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you brought up a couple other really important factors there. Quebec is one of the great mining jurisdictions in the world. Not only are they are an example for the rest of Canada should be doing in mining and natural resources, and the world should be. And so it's a fantastic jurisdiction. And Terry talked about the James Bay Cree. I've been going to the PDAC since the mid 90s. So have the James Bay Cree. I'm one of the famous ones is Matthew Cooncombe. He was the leader of the National Association of Chiefs. And he's been going to that conference for years. And a delegation of the James Bay Cree people have been going to the PDAC. So they are very pro mining. You're in a pro mining state
Yeah.
province,
No,
and you've got a pro mining First Nations group.
yeah, we're certainly blessed there that they're very open minded and they're very progressive. And we're doing a ton of business with them too already right now, and there'll be a lot more in the future. So, and I think with the new programs, that I was in Ottawa after I met with the chief. I went up to Ottawa to meet with the federales, I call them, to the new,
Well, I live
the
in Mexico, so I know what you mean by federales.
so I was able to talk to a number of the people in the various sectors, including the PMO and stuff like that. And my sense of it is that this federal government is serious about developing our resources, and they're also serious about engaging with the First Nations in a positive and productive way, and partnering with them in a true way. And I think if you're serious as a company about doing that, then they're going to be there to help you. You know what I mean? So I think that's good. So it's a process with anything with government, but we're looking forward to engaging with them on it, and because we think this was we're chatting. I said, Sudbury at its peak, 18,000 people in the Steelworkers Union. So
Wow.
18,000 people. So am I saying we're going to be the next Sudbury? No, I'm not saying that. It's possible, but could we get 25% of that? I really think that's possible. And that's material, right? Because
Well, if
think
the
about
federal government wants a model of how to deal with the First Nations, the James Bay Cree are ideal. You couldn't
that's
have a
the
better model. They've been
that's
they've been entrepreneurial in power, hydro. They've been
yep.
Billy Diamond has a great had it. I think he's passed now, but his airline inside of Quebec.
Air
The
Quebec, yep.
the mine Quebec, Air Quebec.
Yep,
their openness to mining. They are very entrepreneurial, and it all comes down to those basics of what I talked about: inclusion, uh, consultation, and respect. And if you do those things well, you can use that James Bay Cree model throughout the country.
I agree. I agree, and that's one of the wonderful things that Quebec has done is they worked their way through that, and they've done a good job of setting that up. And now you can see, as you say, how successful the James Bay Cree are, and it should be a good role model for the rest of the country. And that's the way to do
Absolutely.
things. I mean, like we're staying in Cree owned accommodations. We basically our driller is partially Cree owned. So they've got their fingers in a lot of pies, and that's great. I mean, we're happy to do that.
They're
And
very
that's
entrepreneurial.
yeah. And
That's
yeah,
another thing, I don't think a lot of Canadians really realize is how entrepreneurial First Nations people are. I mean, I think I'm somewhat of an example, but
yeah,
you look at the James Bay, they've got their drillers, their hotels, their their airline, their power generation, and this goes back to forever. Maybe we didn't trade in currency, but we traded in other important things.
yeah.
So
I remember like as a kid, I was brought up on Louis L'Amour books, which was like
okay,
he was a great Western author, and he was very respectful to the First Nations everywhere. Obviously, most of his stories were in the U.S., but he had some Canadian stories too, and like in every situation, the First Nations were known as great traders. I mean, it was all about patience and waiting them out, and you know what I mean. They're very good, and this has been my experience with them, is that these are smart people, and you shouldn't go in there with the view that, hey, I want to take advantage of these people. You should go in there with the view that, hey, let's create a nice pie that we
partnership,
can all
yeah,
share in.
yeah,
Here's what you're going to bring to the table. Here's what I'm going to bring to the table. Here's what the feds are going to bring to the table. Here's what everyone's going to get out of it. And that's the way to approach it. We're not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. We're trying to say, hey, we all need each other to create value together. You know what
yeah.
I mean? And then we can figure out a way to share that value.
And you've
So
got something there that could be generational. So,
yeah,
that's tremendously exciting. Before I let you go, Terry, I wanted to talk about metals a little bit more. I'm extremely bullish on copper. The supply chain is actually in a lot of problems, folks, and I don't think the world really realizes that. And you see what happened when Trump talked about a 50% tariff. This caused a bunch of buying. The price of copper went up to record highs because the supply chain is so tight. And the same thing can be said for silver. Not only is it a monetary metal, it's needed in solar panels. The price of solar panels are dropping dramatically, so they're being used everywhere. You need a lot of silver. Its supply chain is very troublesome. You look at gold. The world is moving back to a gold standard because the fiat currency system and the debt system is broken, and the only way to fix it is with gold being real money again. You've got the problems with platinum and palladium on the supply side. So any new demand comes in, and those prices have all spiked. But ultimately, my strategy is to find companies that are have those metals in the ground. And specifically when it comes to copper exploration and development and platinum and palladium, your choices are very minimal. And if the generalists are coming back into the space and they want to look for the metal stocks that have important discoveries, there's just not very many of those to choose from, and power nickel is one of them. Or power
power metallic.
metallic.
Yeah, I think a couple of things I would say to folks, I can't remember if we still have it in our slide deck, but I think we do. we show the equities and commodities, and
Right.
and the discrepancy between equities and commodities is at its peak. Okay,
Yeah.
and every time it hits there, eventually it comes back, and eventually commodities overshoot and it rips up. But when it's coming, and that move from this crazy peak that's there today just to the median would be a multiple fold increase in mining stock prices. And then when
Right.
it over rips, because it always does, then you're into, you know, there'll be 10 baggers routinely and there'll be 100 baggers in this space. You know what I mean? Because
Absolutely.
they're so undervalued,
Yeah.
and
Actually, I
like,
just did a show this weekend. I do a weekend show, like I think of it like my personal mining conference, and I did a comparison, Terry, between Tesla and Newmont. They both had their quarterly reports out. Tesla's free cash flow was about 140 million dollars. Newmont's free cash flow in that quarter alone was 1.7 billion. Okay. Now, you look at the valuations of those companies, and Tesla has a $900 billion valuation, whereas Newmont has a $43 billion valuation. So the free cash flow, Newmont is 10xing Tesla on free cash flow, but relative to their valuations, it's 1/10 the free cash flow comparison. So it
yeah,
just goes to show you how overvalued the Wall Street and a lot of stocks are compared to mining. And like Robert Friedland says, we're going to have the revenge of the miners. And
yeah.
it's because everything that those other companies need to operate comes from what the miners do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've been pounding the table. Really, I said last I was at the conference in BC. What do they call that one in January? The one.
AME.
Yeah. So I was there, and you know, and I said, look, I was obviously pretty heavily invested. I said I pushed another half in. I'm half in. Okay, I think now's the time to buy. I'm telling you to buy, and I'm not saying buy power nickel. I'm saying, or
Ah,
because
you
it was,
did it too.
but
Power.
at that time it was
Oh,
called power
okay,
nickel.
okay.
But I certainly encouraged it. But I said, because I said a lot of people, even people who are listening, may be struggling. They look at the charts of these companies, and the charts generally on whole are not attractive because they've sort of struggled. But what I've said to people, look, you know, um, if you can't stomach buying individual stocks, buy the funds, buy McKinsey, buy Palace Capital, buy BT Global, buy Van Eck,
Yeah.
buy Templeton. There's a lot of bright minds out there in by 1832 from at Scotia. They are really very capable managers. They've got the best interest. Crescat's another one. There's a number of these, and they've done very well. And
Yep.
it's like, don't miss it because you're not happy with like some individual charts. And I get that can be problematic, but if you can't do it any other way, at least get in there because then it's going to get you hooked, and then you're going to pay attention. Then at some point you're going to start to step in and listen to guys like you, pick up on some of these early things because in all these cases you probably be looking at doing a basket. You want to have 5 or 10 of these things, and you're taking you're like you have a weighting, a half weighting, and a double weighting. That type of approach, and you're going to do super well
Well,
because if you want to.
you can even look at like since gold broke out in early 2024, the price of gold has gone from about 20, let's say 2,100 to 3,300. Okay, nice move, right?
Nice
But
move.
you look at Agnico Eagle, which is one of the best operating gold mines there is. It's gone from $60 a share to 100 and some. So it has significantly, almost 3 or 4x the return in gold. So I'm a big believer in sticking to the best in their breed. And when it comes to an explorer with an important discovery of copper, nickel, platinum, palladium, silver, gold, there really are not a lot of opportunities, Terry. And I'm going to maybe start calling you the Agnico Eagle of the explorers with an important discovery of those metals, because that's the way I look at you, Terry.
Well, thanks, Ben. Listen, we believe it. Fully funded. We've got a great scientific team. We got tremendous ground. We couldn't be more excited to be have this blessed with this opportunity in a great jurisdiction that's highly logistic, friendly, and we expect to have a great, next few years really.
And you've
So
got some of
hopefully,
the smartest people in the business on your team and as shareholders. Robert Friedland, Gina Reinhardt, Rob McEwen. You know, folks, that speaks volumes about the quality of this project.
yeah, we last count we have 15 billionaires in the deal, and because you remember how tough up until the last round we raised all the money ourselves, and because it was impossible to raise capital in Canada, so hard. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a whole other thing. We could talk about that. That's a talk for another day about our capital structures and what we need to do to fix it to give our mining teams a real shot at things. But yeah, it's been going out there and finding smart people who can actually make an investment and aren't looking to trade you for 10 cents. They didn't buy Power Metallic to buy it at $1.45 and sell it at $2.
No.
They're buying it. They think it's going to 15. That's
Yeah.
their thinking, right?
Yeah.
So and we don't. And of course, we have to do a lot of things to make that happen. But that's what you do. You take asymmetric bets if you're these guys, and
Yep.
that's what they're doing. And that's what smart money does. So we're stoked and we're looking forward to having a great fall, and hopefully we'll come back and with some new assays and a bit more of get our geological team on
Yeah,
and give
that'd
you an
be
update
awesome.
in October and sometime this fall, and hopefully have some more good news to share with you.
That's awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time. You've been very generous with it, Terry. I see your phone's going off on you there. You must be getting lots of calls and lots of texts. So thanks a lot. Did you have a quick closer before I close?
No, I think that's about it. I think I pretty much said, all the things we wanted to say. We've had great conversation, and we're excited to have been on the show. Thanks, Alan.
Oh, thank you very much. It's I always like getting in early on stories and telling my audience about all the great things that have happened. So thanks a lot, Terry, and we'll definitely have to get someone from your geological team. Even Dr. Beresford would be awesome, so we can talk about the rocks and the stocks, because that's what I love to
Okay.
do.
All
Uh,
right. Sounds good.
all right, so there you go, folks. As always, my shows are for information purposes only. It's important for you to do your homework, speak with your financial advisors before making any investment decisions. And when you're doing your homework, something that I've admired about Power Metallic Mines is that since they were power nickel, is they've been very good at getting on the digital airwaves and telling their story. And there's videos out there with Dr. Steve Beresford, their other leading geologists on their team. And I really advise you to do your homework because, as I said when I was talking to Terry, that if you're like-minded of me, that you like to get into the metal stocks that have those important metals, there really is very limited amount of great stories out there, especially in the exploration space, especially in a jurisdiction like Quebec, and having tremendous high grade, thick intersections, and the chance to find more of that. And I think you want to do that homework as soon as you can, because as Terry was explaining, they're doing a lot of drilling. So the news flow is going to be busy from here till next year and beyond. And I think they're going to keep finding a lot of high grade. These pods of tremendous high grade, they don't happen by accident. And when they've got that juiced up of a system, there's usually a lot more there to find. So do that homework, speak with your financial advisors. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.